Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
This Superman portrait is really a send-up of the original Fleischer cartoon intro, where you saw a quick explanation of the destruction of Krypton, the rocket ship coming to Earth, and the pose of Superman with fists on hips, where he's kind of looking down a little bit. This is an exaggeration of that, where I'm getting my traditional kind of Alex Ross low angle looking up the body kind of shot, which again I'll credit to Neil Adams as an influence. This is really just connecting with the most fundamental kind of influence in my life from that cartoon shaping the way that I illustrate Superman. It also connects in ways I'd never even thought about when I was doing the piece with one of the most famous images that Steve Rude did in World's Finest of Superman, where he kind of recreated that Fleischer moment with his painted figure of Superman, and then I would spend the rest of my career pretty much doing what he did before me.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here with one of the masters of genre fiction. I've enjoyed his work for decades. I'm so glad he's back with a brand new collection of fantasy and sci-fi tales. Thalos, I'm going to get it, Thalos and Other Stories from Michael J. Friedman. Welcome, Michael.
Yeah, welcome. Well, thanks for having me on. You know something? I have to do one thing. I just realized I'm looking at myself. And it's kind of dimly lit. Give me 1 second.
All right, well, you see me in the dark, but feel free because you look fine to me. We're going to not only talk about Mike's new collection of short stories that he's putting out through Kickstarter. The Kickstarter campaign is underway, but later on we'll also talk about some of my favorite Star Trek novels that Mike has written over the years. But so tell us about Thalos and Other Stories. This is a collection. Are they just fantasy, or is it fantasy, sci-fi? What genres are you playing with now?
It's fantasy, there's science fiction, and there's superhero stories.
Oh, great.
Yeah. This is the fourth collection of my work that of my short fiction. You know, for when I started out, everybody said, you know, you have to write some short stories, and then after you get a following, you can go on and write longer stuff and novels, perhaps. I went about it backwards, as I've done a lot of things actually that way. And I started writing novels, and they were accepted and published. And it was a while before I ever wrote a short story. And it was daunting, to tell you the truth, because, short stories, you don't have a lot of room to play.
Right.
You can't go off on tangents. It's every square foot is valuable real estate, and you got to make a difference with each square foot. So it was daunting. And then I wrote one, and then I wrote another, and I kind of liked it, but I was still writing novels. That was still my stock in trade. And then recently, like in the last 10 years, I started developing a taste for writing short stories. Ideas were coming to me that really didn't have the legs to become novels. And before you know it, it was like a bug. I just couldn't stop writing short stories, to the point that now I write a lot more of those than longer form work. It's really funny how that's kind of turned around. But it's called Thalos and Other Stories. It's the fourth collection of my short fiction. This is the cover. It's a detail from the cover, okay. It's about the title story, which is Thalos. And Thalos is sort of a it's a science fiction, almost like a Star Wars kind of science fiction, with its roots in Greek mythology.
I was going to say, being Greek, I'm like, wait a minute, I know that name.
Yeah. You're right, right. Well, I mean, it's the way a lot of people pronounce the name Delos, right? Which is a location in Greece, and I'm not going to tell you any more about it because I don't want to give too much away.
Okay,
But
okay.
but if you're familiar with Greek mythology, as you read this story, you'll gain a depth of understanding little by little that makes it a little different from other things you've read.
That's great, man. And here, forgive the Greek pride, because I am a massive fan of mythology, and in fact, you certainly with your Aztec books, I think get into not only the Aztec culture but also Aztecian mythology and stuff. And I like Norse mythology. I don't know, man. I for me, it's Greek mythology. I really think those are like the real the ones that spoke to me, and not just because I'm Greek, and maybe because Mike, I'm a couple of years younger, but I saw those Sword and Sandal movies from the
Right.
Sons of Hercules, as the package was called back in the day when they'd show them on Saturday afternoons on independent TV. So yeah, I
Right.
don't know, man. I think I'm more of I love Thor, you know,
Right. Right.
but yeah, I don't know. I think Greek mythology really is fun, and I also love the idea of tying it to science fiction. Again, our age and stuff. Chariots of the Gods. What's his name? Eric
Von Daniken.
Von Daniken. Thank you,
Right.
thank
Right.
you. Yeah, that book and that documentary came out when we were kids and everything, and all that stuff just lit my imagination. But I do see a great connection between Greek mythology and sci-fi.
Right. And in fact, I've dabbled in, I had a trilogy. The first three books I ever published were oh wait, what?
Oh, you want to see it? Okay, I'm putting it. I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but when people make funny comments, I'm happy to put that up there. So
Yeah.
Mike Edmonds says he's an Aztec at heart.
Huitzilopochtli. Right. Okay. Good. Um, but
Go on.
so in addition to the Aztec stories, I have the first book I did as a member of Crazy Eight was called Fight the Gods, and that was a contemporary fantasy, New York fantasy, with its roots also in Greek mythology.
Oh,
Uh,
that's great, man.
yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned Crazy Eights, because I meant to mention it earlier. This is your friends that you are all together and doing amazing uh, standalone novels, but also anthologies where you all contribute. And these are guys like our friends Paul Kupperberg and Peter David is part of that group. Give me some of the other Crazy Eight people.
Bob Greenberger
Of
and
course.
Glenn Howman, Mary Fan, Hildy Silverman, Russ Colchamiro, and Aaron Rosenberg. I know I'll be leaving somebody out and they'll kill me. Who else?
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Jeff Thorne, who's a
Thorne.
great guy and writes for television as well as for in print.
Sure.
And I think I hope that's it. I hope that's it. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out. Anyway, there's 10 of us. So and that's the crazy part, right? Crazy
Okay.
Eight. But in Crazy Eight, which is our independent publishing group, we have the freedom to write that which we would want to read, right?
Yeah.
There's no publisher telling us, well, you don't want to do that, you don't want to do that, you could do that, maybe you can do that. We just do what's closest to our hearts, the thing that we want to write, the thing that we would read, and so these are our most authentic visions, and Delos and Other Stories is very much the kind of thing that I would want to read if I were if if I were buying a book. It's I'm a big fan of the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone, right? As I'm sure you are. And one of the things that you often saw in those stories was a little twist at the end.
Absolutely.
Right? The twist is not enough in and of itself, to justify the time and effort that you spend in reading a short story. But if it's got the twist, it's a little value added. So I always try to have something at the end that surprises the reader. You know,
That's outstanding. Yeah, yeah. No, obviously, I'm sure Serling and the Twilight Zone writers were all inspired by O. Henry and those
mhm,
great short
mhm,
stories of
right,
his time and
right,
everything. But no, I totally agree with you. No, those Twilight Zones, it's like Soylent Green is people, to serve man. It's a cookbook,
right. It's a good book. Right,
Or
right.
one of the other favorites, Agnes Moorehead, The Invaders, where she's the old lady and you never hear her speak and everything. And you
Right.
think they are there's an invading ship, and at the end, I'm spoiling 70-year-old Twilight Zones, but yeah,
Mhm.
it's like it's an American spaceship, first off planet
Right,
mission and stuff. So they're
right.
the good guys, not to her.
The 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 thing I shoot for, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this regard. The thing I shoot for is what you saw in The Usual Suspects. The dominoes are falling one after the other, and it's all very logical, and you're following it without any trouble. And you get to the end and you realize it's not what you thought. And all of a sudden, the dominoes are falling in the other direction. You're going, oh, wait a second. When he did that, it was that. It wasn't that. It was that. And that's what I try to do in every story. I try to have a little of that where you go, I thought I was reading this. I'm actually reading that.
That's excellent, man. Tell us about some of the other stories.
One of them is called Trash Talker.
Okay.
I can't say anything about it. I shouldn't even have brought it up, to tell you the truth. But it's about a detective. It's a police procedural, and
Okay.
I guarantee it's like no other police procedural you've ever seen or heard of in your life. Um, I also, there's in these collections of short stories, I have a couple of running collections. One is The City of a Thousand Gods,
Okay.
and in The City of a Thousand Gods, it's a kind of fantasy city, along the lines of what you might see in maybe Lord of the Rings or something like that, except it's full of temples to gods that actually exist.
Okay.
And so some of them are funny, like God of last Thursday's newspaper or something like that. But and some of them are very powerful and solemn gods. But things take place. So every time I write about the City of a Thousand Gods, one time I write about a budding attorney in that milieu. Another time I write about essentially, I mean, it's not much more than a medieval level of civilization, but I write about essentially a gumshoe, an investigator. Another time, in this particular case, I'm writing about a guy who hangs out with thieves. He's a serving guy in a tavern that caters to thieves, and the thieves are a hoot. They're constantly stealing things from each other so quickly that you don't even they don't know that they're being stolen from, because they're so intent on stealing from someone else. So the City of a Thousand Gods is one of the themes that runs through these collections.
That's great. That's cool that there's a runner like that. Is there
Mhm.
another group?
There is. There is, and this is an homage to the Legion of Superheroes, and it's called the Company of Enhanced Beings. Not too different, but different enough, right?
I hear you. No, that's cool. Is it
And
set in the future as well as like the Legion, or no?
it's in my mind it is, but we never make that clear.
Okay.
It's an intergalactic setting, not intergalactic. It's interplanetary, intersystem,
Okay.
and uh, and you have this group of young superheroes. And what I try to do is the other thing I do in addition to the little twist at the end is I try to demystify things that have always been seem mystical to me, like superheroes. So these are all superheroes, and like the Legion of Superheroes, there's a lot of lad and lass and boy, in these names. Um, and in one story, I describe what it was like to try out
Oh,
for
fantastic! Just like the
the
old issues,
Legion, right?
absolutely, man.
I mean, we always see, particularly, I recall when they were doing stories about the Legion of Substitute Heroes, you would see them, applying for membership, and then they'd be turned down, and oh no, it's kind of a bummer. But really, it must have been a wrenching experience, whether they got in or not.
Sure.
This is the culmination of their existence to that point. And in my in my stories about them, when you see somebody trying out, before they get in front of the panel that's going to review them and their powers, they're throwing up in the bushes. They're so nervous they can't stand it. So that's the type of thing I do in these stories, and uh, this particular story about the Company of Enhanced Beings is about. I was thinking one of the things that always kind of intrigued me was when it were the stories that showed Cosmic Boy or Saturn Girl or Lightning Lad with their older sibling.
Sure.
Right? Like,
Lightning
Lightning
Lord.
Lad and Lightning Lord, right?
Absolutely.
And their relationship that must have been crazy.
Yep.
So I have such a relationship is at the core
The
of
new.
the Company of Enhanced Being story in this volume.
That's great, man. Oh, I love hearing that. That's fantastic. Brad has a question. Calling
Hmm.
back something we were just talking about. Will Maxla Cole Hua show up in the anthology? That is your Aztec detective. Am I correct?
Right, right. Brad, no, unfortunately, there's no room for Mashla in this anthology, which is not to say that we won't have another Mashla Kalua story somewhere along the line, perhaps another novel. But um,
You've
uh,
done 3 or 4 of Mashla's
well,
stories so far.
I did the first volume that I did was two novellas put together. Uh, and then I did a recently, I guess about a year ago.
Yeah, about a
I,
year ago. I think that's the first time we talked.
I did uh, a novel, full length novel, and um, I also did a one off, which is what Brad's referring to, a prequel to these other stories that appeared in one of my collections. So good question, Brad, but no, Mashli's
Not
not in
this
this.
time. No, that's great, man. Do you want to rattle off the titles of your other short story collections for people to look for?
Oh
Because I'm
yeah.
intrigued by both of these runners, and yeah, I'd be interested to read the other stories and everything.
Now you would think this would be an easy thing for me to do,
I'm sorry, buddy.
right? Right? It, so what I did is I made a mistake when I
Complicated
when I
title.
started doing these. I thought, it would be funny to say, uh, the title of the story, and then and other and other um, uh, compelling revelations of the muse, right? And
Sure.
so I did that, and that got to be really really hard because I can't remember them.
I'm
That's one problem, and and another is that it never fit. It never fit on a page very well. So let's see if I have. I don't have them handy. I should,
I'm even
right?
going to look it up as well while we're
Yeah,
talking.
but yeah. So the most recent one I did before this was The Immigrant and Other Tales. That's an
Okay.
easy one to remember.
Very nice.
Um, and the second one, the one that preceded that, was called Headless and Other Yada 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 of the Muse. And what was the first one? John, I should know this. They're my
Shame
books,
on
right?
me. I'm sorry for asking you like this, man, putting you on the spot.
No,
But obviously, people
I'll
can.
figure this out. It's Cabal and Other
Okay.
Yada 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 of the
Sure.
Muse. But one of the things it used to be when I was when I first got into publishing, it used to be that you know no publisher really wanted to do a collection of your short stories, right? These they didn't sell as well as novels, and even if you were Stephen King, they went, I don't know, do we have to? Do we have to do this short story stuff? Nobody really wants to hear this, and which is why Stephen King had to publish a collection of short stories under a different name,
Right.
right? And a different contract. But 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 with the advent of the internet, things have changed. People really sometimes you can buy just the short story, just one,
Absolutely.
and so there's all kinds of options for writers that didn't exist before. And ironically, collections of short stories do very well in the age of the internet.
I can
So
see that though, because it's a good travel kind of self-contained story. And yeah, I mean, so no, that's great. And truly I've appreciated efforts like you and your other Crazy Eight collaborators and everything that have come up with these anthologies, because you're right. And also thankfully the fact, especially with again you and your collaborators at Crazy Eight, you guys have cultivated your own audiences, so you kind of I think sense the kind of thing that they are interested in. And again, your track record. I mean, that's the great thing is, I mean, you're proven, I think, to a lot of us that have enjoyed your work over the years. It's like, all right, we know we're gonna get something good.
yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I think there is something to that. That people know what to expect, and if they liked it, they'll come back and revisit you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and
I
there's
mean,
something.
it's like stars. It's like actors that get bigger than the stories themselves. Is I want to see a Jimmy Stewart movie. I want to see a
Right,
Spencer Tracy movie. I want to see a Tom Hanks movie.
right,
It's like, all right, I know what I'm getting, and I'm going to enjoy it.
right. And there's something about the short story. The short story is really, I think, a um, more going to say valid, more valid form for science fiction well, for science fiction for sure, because you have a science fiction concept, and yeah, you can stretch it out into a novel, and it might be a good one, but if you can get it into a short story without rushing it, and develop it fully in a short story, I think that's really the best format for science fiction ideas. Get in, here's the idea, isn't this cool? And get out.
Understood. Brad had a second question, and I know we've already discussed this, but I'll let you tell him again. He says the artwork that we saw for Thaler suggests sword and sorcery. Will we see these types of stories? So yeah, will there be more? Yeah, obviously you just described some of the other genres that you're playing with in this collection. Are there other fantasy stories?
there are fantasy stories. There's this is sort of a hybrid, swords and sorcery and science fiction, sort of what you might what you might see in Star Wars, as I said. Um, there are fantasy stories, contemporary fantasies, um, and um, and there is science fiction, and there are other superhero stories. You know, the I love the superhero story. To tell you the truth, if I had to write a book about just in one genre, it would probably be superheroes. I just these ideas just come to me, and I go, I have to write that. I have to write that. I'll give you an example. So one of the stories in the book is called Veneer.
Veneer.
Veneer, and it's about a guy who came across a um, sort of a suit in the wilderness somewhere, and it was really an alien artifact. And what it does is it encapsulates him in this. It's not really a metal. It's just a almost like an aura,
Okay.
right? And but it encapsulates him. He feels like he's in something, and he was a very big hero at one time, and then he got older and he kind of got out of the business a little bit, and he had a family and his daughter had children. Now he's a grandfather, and he's got a place in Colorado, and his daughter and his grandchildren, everybody's coming to visit him, and they're having a big family weekend when one of his old enemies shows up. Now, a lot of these stories come from things in my life. Now, I'm not a grandfather yet, but I do have I'll say an unusual form of claustrophobia.
Okay.
Okay, which came up just today as my wife and I were transporting a bed in my Outback, and my seat was all the way pushed up near um,
Dashboard.
the dashboard, right? And I can get into a crowded elevator, no problem, but I can't feel things against me.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. Um, so when I feel confined in that respect, it's intolerable, and it's gotten worse over the years.
Wow.
And so here's this guy who wears the veneer when he's younger, and now he's got to save his he's got to do something about this enemy who's come after him during this family weekend, and his family's lives are at stake. And what he's got to do is put on the suit again, put on the veneer, and he can't, because he's got this kind of claustrophobia that I have. He can't. He can't stand the thought of feeling it against him, right? And he goes through all kinds of, well, what if I were to do this, or what if maybe I could just try to do this? Maybe if it was only for a few. He tries all kinds of things, and he can't. It's a real quandary.
Wow.
And his family's lives are hanging in the balance.
Very interesting. That's cool. That sounds great, man.
So, yeah.
Well, I was going to ask if some of these superhero ideas, and again, you've certainly spent your time in comic books as well. Do you ever think about getting an artist and making it a graphic novel or?
Well, I did a graphic novel a few years ago called Empty Space. In fact, wait, hang on a second. This I do have.
Handy.
I do have at my beck and call here, at my fingertips, as it were.
Zoom in. There we go.
Yeah, this is called Empty Space. It was done with an artist, great Brazilian artist, Caio Cacau, and it's a kind of a space opera thing. And the idea, let me find a nice page to show you. The idea is that here, it's a nice spread. I don't know if I could do it justice.
No, it looks great. No, his art looks amazing. Absolutely. Right? Cool. And what's it about?
It's about, well, the idea is that out in space you can't replenish. If you're really out in space, you can't replenish your crew as often as you would like, because it involves coming all the way back to Earth, or at least a satellite situation, a space station, and so what would happen is these ships would go out and they would lose crewmen, and then they'd be understaffed. So they developed this technology for resurrecting dead crewmen.
Oh God.
It could only be done once. It could only be done once,
All right.
and it's temporary. It only lasts about a year, and then they go crazy and they die.
Okay.
But in the meantime, you can, you avoid that understaffing situation. Um, and so these guys, because they have emotional deficits as well, they're called empties. So therefore, empty space.
Cool.
And, my next solo project, which probably won't take place for another year or so, is a prose novel that serves as a sequel to the graphic novel.
Oh wow.
Thought that'd be interesting.
Well, Brad read Empty Space, so that's cool, and I'm sure he's excited to hear that a sequel is on the way. That's great, man. Fantastic. So,
Yeah,
and again, that's the thing. Then you're a good world builder, and I think your high concepts are terrific. Yeah, so that's great. I wanna, if it's okay, I want to talk a bit about what you've done in Star Trek over the years, because I think you've one of my favorite titles of a Don Fagen song, "Walk Between the Raindrops," and from the Night Fly, and I always appreciate because of the framework of Star Trek, and we come in already understanding it and everything. You've written short stories and novels for Star Trek, correct?
A few short stories, yes.
A couple of the
Mostly,
anthologies.
mostly novels,
Yeah, of
but
course, mostly novels. Yes,
right.
absolutely.
And what was good about those um, was I was pitching ideas to the shows, and some of the, I would get like, a few different kinds of responses. I would, they would say, "Yeah, Mike, this is great. It's already in development."
Sure,
Or
sure.
right, or or yeah, this is good, but it just doesn't quite fit what we're doing. It would have fit the other show better, right? So I put that one away, and then when I had a chance to do a comic story or a short story, short prose story, I dragged that one out again, and I said, "Well, they didn't think it was too bad. Maybe we can do something with this." So nothing went to waste.
That's cool. Was for the novels, and really even at DC when you were doing the comic book for Star Trek, was Paramount or anybody from Paramount part of the vetting for either the novels or the comics?
Yeah, yeah. Um, there was initially, there were actually two offices at Paramount that initially did that. One was the licensing department, which was always staffed by somebody like Paula Block, who knew what they were doing and knew writing. And if they told you, "Well, you can't do this, but here's another option,"
Oh, great!
you might like. They were very, very good about it.
Wow.
And then there was Gene Roddenberry's office, which for a while was like another layer of approvals. And Gene, I don't think Gene actually ever saw what we were working on, but in his office it was very much like, "No, you can't do this.
Ah,
You just can't."
yeah, no explanation.
Just to give you an idea, so when we were writing the comics, for DC, I was writing the Next Generation comic. Occasionally you would have the characters' thoughts
Sure.
in a caption,
Yeah.
and like, they're thinking, "Gee, this alien seems helpful, but is he really?" That kind of thing.
Certainly.
And we got a comment from Gene's office, no, you can't do this. And the classic line was, our characters don't think. And I kind of like after I kind of got it. Like when you see them on TV, there's no voiceover telling you what they're thinking usually,
Certainly.
right? So they said, no, no, our characters don't think.
Well,
So
you
so
proved it wrong.
it had its speed bumps, that
Sure.
that process.
Honestly, man, I constantly pour over Mark Altman and Roger, I believe it was Roger Lace, who was his co-author of those oral history
Yeah,
Star Trek things that he just released a couple of years ago, and he called it the 50-year mission. And
right.
Roddenberry's notes for Next Generation, especially at the beginning, like no conflict amongst the crew, and it's like, yeah, but as you and Mike and I know you're nodding and agree, obviously agreeing. I mean, we all know it's like, no, that's where story comes from is
Right.
character conflict. They don't have to hate each other, they don't have to want to kill each other, but disagreement isn't a bad thing, you know. And that's why, thank God, I think Deep Space Nine always was my favorite show. Well, I should say, once it found its footing, because obviously, just like most television shows, and especially when you're dealing with 26 episodes in a season, there's hit and miss. And
Hmm.
and I have to say, going back to the first season of Deep Space Nine, a lot of it plays better now than I think it did when at first it was so different from Next Generation. I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, I like all the actors, and of course, I'm happy to see Miles O'Brien get a little more agency, but I wasn't sure. But yeah, it's like and certainly that was, I mean, obviously, poor Gene passed away midway through Next Generation and everything. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it's Deep Space Nine. I mean, I love the original series, and I love them all. Yes, well, new Star Trek, I shake my fist at every now and then from my porch. But I don't know. Do you have a favorite of the groups?
Well, I'm not sure Deep Space Nine was my favorite, but I will tell you it was the best written. They had the best episodes and the best writing, and the decision to depict a war. Wars are always compelling, right? I
Yes,
mean, that was
yes.
a great decision. So Deep Space Nine, certainly the best written of the Star Trek series. Um, I think I think my favorite, it's either going to be the original series or Next Generation.
Sure.
Um, and again, not because it was necessarily always the best written, but it was compelling. It was compelling. Kirk was a very compelling character,
Yeah.
and in a very different way, Picard was very compelling as well. So I really enjoyed those series for that reason.
I understand. And again, we're going to talk about some of these stories that you walk between the raindrops. And we've
Hmm.
talked about this before. The three books that you did about the relationship between Jim Kirk and Gary Mitchell, My Brother's Keeper, was, I guess, the name of the whole series,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
really fleshed out again in flashback their relationship and how important they were to each other. And you get a slight sense of it in Where No Man Has Gone Before. It's
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
pilot, and everyone, of course, knows and loves the Kirk Spock relationship. But yeah, it's cool that that they gave you that opportunity
Yeah.
to
Oh
tell
yeah.
those stories.
I was very fortunate. You know, um, that was something I like to do. I like to shine light in dark corners of the Star Trek universe. And the Brothers Keeper trilogy was one example of that. My favorite scene there is and it's funny. It was a scene that I thought of before. It's a trilogy. It was a scene that I thought of before I wrote anything else. And usually my style is to jump around. Today I'm going to write this scene. Tomorrow I'm going to write that scene. It doesn't matter where it is. That's what I feel like doing today, and I think I'll do a good job as a result. But in this case, I didn't write that scene until the end of near the end of the third book, which is where it comes up, and it's a scene where you know Gary's death is sort of glossed over, by Starfleet. They say, he died bravely, and they don't really give the details because they don't want to let that become common knowledge about the
Sure.
galactic barrier,
Right.
right? But Kirk goes to Gary's parents and tells them the truth about, they say, "Oh, Jim, it's so good to see you. You were such a good friend to Gary." And he says, "Yeah, sit down,
Yeah.
because I got to tell you what happened." And he has to tell them that he's the one
Right.
who killed Gary.
Yeah.
So it was a hard scene to write, but I think it gave energy to the whole trilogy. The idea, knowing that was coming up, and for me it colored the whole trilogy as I was writing it.
Well, and now not only does it show the dynamics of their relationship, but also you get them on the USS Republic, and then you get in the second novel the Constitution, and then finally them on Enterprise. And that's the great thing, man. No, you really get to explore both characters
Right.
through their lives till the end of Gary's life. Obviously, pretty
Yeah.
cool.
It was
Excellent.
it was a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun.
Here I'm going to go to the comments. Brad wanted to know who you think it's easier to write, Kirk or Picard.
Um, I think it's a little easier to write Picard. I think both of those characters come to me pretty easily, but Picard is easier. Um, the more times you can say number one, the more that dialogue sounds like Picard.
Okay, interesting.
So uh, you know, uh, let's take a closer look. Number one, and then it's Picard. He said number one. It's got to be Picard.
That's
So
hilarious.
so engage. And, it's funny. I do a much better impression of Picard without hair. I don't know. Easier.
Well, before we jump to some of your Picard books that are among my favorites, I did want to point out Shadows on the Sun because it's a great look at McCoy. And, we always hear about it's interesting. It always seems like we heard more about McCoy's daughter than we did the ex wife. And this is such a great story that takes place in kind of the TOS movie era, and the maroon uniforms and everything. And they go to a planet where McCoy's ex-wife is now an important statesman and part of
Mhm.
the diplomacy and everything that they have to deal with. And it's great because you really see Bones kind of a little uncomfortable. And whereas
Right.
usually Bones is the one who, whether he's happy or not, it's he doesn't hold back, and he's not he always wears his emotions on his sleeve. But yeah,
Right.
tell me about that book.
All right. If Bones isn't happy, nobody's happy, right? I What happened is, um, a woman who was in charge, Carla Mason, was the woman in charge at the time of the licensing department at Paramount,
Mm-hmm.
and she came to New York to visit, and one of the and we and there was me and Bob Greenberger and Peter David and Dave Stern, I think, who was the editor, um, or maybe it was John Ordover. I'm not sure who was the editor at the time, but uh, um, we talked about projects. What would you like to do in the near future? And one of the things we talked about was doing, excuse me, was doing books that focused on the biographies of the lesser characters. right? So McCoy and Scotty and Uhura and Chekhov,
Yeah.
um, Sulu, and this was the one that I wanted to do. I said I want to do the Bones centric book, and so I got a chance. I got a chance to do this. Um, One of the things that I really loved about this book was the the um, the culture that in which it took place, the planetary culture. It was a culture in which assassination is very highly regarded. Right? There's nothing shameful or controversial about it. A good assassin is there's nothing better. And and I kind of juxtaposed this highly regarded agent of death with McCoy, who's a highly regarded agent of life, right? He saves lives, and this other guy destroys lives. And the interaction between them, I thought was very very kind of stimulating for me, right? I think more than anything else, I like to write dialogue. If I could write just dialogue, that'd be okay with me. Which is good because it's when you write a comic, it's not that much more than that from the writer's standpoint.
Certainly.
And I love dialogue, and there was some great opportunities to write dialogue between these two guys butting heads. And what I had to do is, as you can imagine, I had to give them equal weight. I didn't want to just have McCoy being right about it and the other guy being wrong. Excuse me. I
Yeah.
had to show both sides of that coin and convince the reader, hopefully, by the end that, gee, the other guy had a point.
Absolutely. You know, and forgive me, Mike. I don't know if we talked about this last time. I The way Strange New World's first season ended, and we're all anticipating season two. Um, Number one, Una gets taken away because it's discovered that she is from a race that I want to say augments, but I forget what the word was for Khan's people. Well, the eugenics wars, but the that they were genetically manipulated to be.
Yeah, beans.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because I see a lot of younger people who come to Star Trek now and they see it as discrimination. And I understand that. And again, it's the great thing about art. Take it in and, interpret it your own way. But just like you said, that you need to show equal weight, that this is going to come to some sort of hearing. Just like in the case of, we never saw the hearing, but certainly like on Deep Space Nine, when Bashir was revealed to be an augment and genetically enhanced.
Right.
That, well, wait a minute, that's one of our tenements that no, we don't allow people in Starfleet for that. I hope to see that kind of equal weight because I think the younger people aren't aware of the history of
Mhm.
eugenics, not only during Hitler's time in Nazi Germany, but even here in
Sure.
the States, where it
Yeah.
really was a practice. And it's like, well, you've got to give equal weight because the Star Trek writers of the '60s, when they created Khan, were saying, don't make the mistake of our past. That's why we're against it. And so I really hope that has that kind of equal weight because I think it's a valid argument against. And I really just hope it doesn't become this polemic of, oh yeah, I'm really sorry, you're right, we are discriminating. It's like, no, man, there's a real reason why,
Right.
and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it.
Yeah. I hope they do. Um, I hope they do. They've done pretty well over the years. I say they. It's not a different. Different writing staffs have done
Absolutely, yeah, 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 yeah.
over the years. One that comes to mind is Measure of a Man.
The one of the best Next Generation stories.
right.
Go ahead and say your thing, and then I'll.
Yeah. So it's data. It's data, and the question is he a living being? Does he have the rights of a living being in that society? And they kind of they didn't know, they didn't weigh in all on one side. It was, I thought it was pretty well done.
Though, and then I got to be honest, man. That season of Picard, the first season, they kind of blew it out of the water. And I really like, because I mean, especially even to the point of the concern was, well, then maybe we'll make 1,000 datas or whatever, and they do. And it's like, wait a minute, what did you do 20 years ago, man?
Yeah.
And I guess I suppose you can argue that policies change, politics change, and whatever. I'm like, wow, you really kind of shit, frankly. This is my
Yeah,
word, everybody, but you really shit all over Measure of a Man making
yeah,
it this way. And then also, I don't know how you feel, but hey, let's make Picard an android. I'm like, well, then he's dead. I mean, and it's like, what are you doing, man?
it was.
I have big hopes for the third season. Terry Matalas seems to be a guy that really understands and respects the canon. But yeah, your thoughts on any of that garbage? And I say garbage meaning my
Right.
interpretation of it, please.
Yeah. Um, I I thought Picard was a mixed bag. I thought there was some good things there. I was happy to see, Riker and Troy, and
Sure.
and there was some good stuff there. I really like the way it opens, where Picard's got Romulan servants essentially, right? I really liked some of that, and I but there were plot holes and weird things happening in Picard that I didn't like so much. And also some of the choices that they made, not necessarily even when it came to big stuff, but little stuff like, in the last episode, just when things are hitting the fan, Picard takes a nap. Takes a takes a nap. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
No, I hear you,
that
man.
wouldn't have happened in Sons of Hercules.
Absolutely not in those great movies. Absolutely
Mhm.
that the
Yeah.
no, or well, we have to be careful. We can't screw up the timeline. Well, they leave Rios back in the 21st century, and it's like, isn't that a problem? Aren't you
Right,
breaking
right.
butterflies there, or
No problem, right?
and
Right.
or the midway through the season two where they Rios is on the bus with all the other people being grabbed by ice and taken out of the country and stuff, and it's like, all right, they rescue him, but it's like, what about all these other aliens that would have likely have gone where they would have
Mhm.
unfortunately been deposed to, as opposed to just setting them free? Some of the people they killed, that the Borg Queen killed, I'm like, yeah, aren't
Right,
those freaking
right, right.
butterflies? All right, whatever, man. I mean,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Some of us
Right.
are, we're enough sci-fi nerds that we pay attention to nonsense like that. We all read A Sound of Thunder, the great Ray Bradbury story,
Right,
where the
right,
butterfly
right.
effect first comes from.
Sure.
Yeah, whatever. All right, and all right, let's get back to positive stuff in some of your great books. And really, a couple of Picard books that I loved, and two of them really don't deal with Picard's past. Dead of Winter, or Death in Winter, pardon me.
Winter.
Really, really cool. Great look at and there you see the silhouette of Beverly behind
Mhm.
Picard, but their relationship, and that's another thing I'm looking forward to in season 3 is how they confront each other and
Mhm.
what's happened since All Good Things, and now Picard season 3 of them being together again. I got to hang out a little bit with Gates McFadden at a con last summer, and
Oh,
oh my god, oh, she is so
oh,
sweet, lovely woman, wonderful woman, and she was so excited, and she's like, I'm telling you, this season is going to be great. Metalis gave me so much fun stuff to do. She's like, honestly, she goes, you're going to love it. She goes, I know you're a real fan. You're going to love it. I'm like, okay.
yeah, yeah. I would have been speechless.
She's amazing.
Mm.
She and Frakes was incredibly kind to me as well. So, because,
I
it's like, you don't want to be that guy. And I'm like, hey, sorry, but And they're like, no, no, it's cool. And I'm like, okay, great. So no, they were terrific to me. But let's talk about Death in Winter. What a great idea, what a great story to really explore this unrequited love that, obviously he had for Beverly. And then, she ends up with his best friend, Jack Crusher.
Yeah, that was a controversial book because you know I guess I don't know. I guess I can spoil it. It came out like I don't know 20, 30 years ago, but the the death that we were suggesting. You look at the cover and you can see we're suggesting that the death that takes place is Beverly's, and we did that on purpose. Like, gee, if fans think she could die in this, they'll be so eager to read this book. And they were, but they were ticked off too, because you're going to kill Beverly. We never said that, but we kind of implied it. So they were ticked off. We were getting letters, crazy letters from
Awesome.
from fans, and I guess it didn't hurt sales, but I was scared for my life for a while there.
Really.
Like, I'm just a writer here. Don't kill me.
Just a story.
Yeah, it's just a story, and in fact, I guess I could say, obviously, it's not Beverly who dies there, but what I wanted to do there was give Beverly a chance to do Beverly-like things, but also non-Beverly-like things. Make her a little bit of an action figure, and take her out of her comfort zone, and have her fighting for her life and doing clever things, the kind of things you would more readily associate maybe with Riker or even Worf, and she pulls it off.
Yeah.
And of course, who wouldn't? I go back to like the very first Star Trek book I ever wrote was called Double Double, and
I love, the Kirk confronting his android double from
right,
What Little Girls Are Made Of. Absolutely.
right. So I remember when my agent said to me, "So, would you want to write a Star Trek book?" I was like, "Heck, yeah!" I mean, putting words in the mouths of Kirk and Spock and excuse me. I said, absolutely. Well, I had the same reaction when they said, you want to do a book about, to kick off uh, our prose season 8, basically, right? Our season 8 in prose. You want to kick that off, and something maybe about Picard and Beverly. I was like, heck yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's who wouldn't want to do that.
That's great, man. Yeah, and again, walking between the raindrops. I mean, filling in the blanks of this great relationship. Before we wrap up, I also want to acknowledge the Valiant, because I love, again, this is Picard, pre-Stargazer, when he's an
Yeah.
officer on the Valiant, and you give us a new captain to look at as well. That's got to be because you want a Federation captain, to feel like he's one, like the Mercury 7, as different as they are. We think of them as a group, or any of the classic Apollo, and even modern astronauts and stuff. But yeah, so like, what was your thinking in terms of? And right now, I know he's a Hispanic gentleman. What was the captain's name? Do you remember from the Valiant? Oh, I see. I'm putting you on the spot again.
I don't, but I had the book over there. I could probably figure it out.
I was going to say, I know you say it like right at the beginning, because I was when I was trying to screen cap the cover.
Hang on one second. Here, pardon my belly button. Here,
no worries, man.
No? All right. Let's see.
Which one of us is going to get it first? Let's see.
Right. Oh,
Carlos Tarasco.
Was it Carrasco? Yeah. Oh, Tarasco. Carlos Tarasco. Right. The very first words in the book. Yeah.
So yeah, what'd you do in terms of like coming up with his persona?
Well, I knew that he was going to be, sacrificed. You know,
Sure.
he was a he got the word out about what the galactic barrier had done to him and his crew, um, and we knew that the message had gotten out, and so it wasn't going to be a lighthearted romp for this guy. We knew that he was going to be at the end of his rope and just barely managing to get the word out. So he was going to be a heroic character and a self-sacrificing character, and so that's what I was thinking when I was writing him. One of the great joys of writing Star Trek is coming up with new captains and crews. Right? It's
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
it's the most fun you can have as a Star Trek writer. And when I wrote the Stargazer books, where you see Picard and his old crew, as you do in this book,
Yes.
um, uh, um, it was a joy because you only knew that Picard was the captain, and there was one character mentioned in the battle. Um, uh, there was one character mentioned, Morgan, I think it was, um, and uh, and outside of that, was it Morgan? I think it was. Anyway, there was one character mentioned in the episode "The Battle" in the first season of Next Generation,
Mm.
and then and that's all you knew. So you had a blank slate that you could fill in, and it was fun. It was there's nothing more fun than coming up with a crew, and
Yeah. Well, and
you know
you got that much like any military branch of the United States and stuff. Starfleet has this perception of the best of the best, and
mhm.
again, it's a good template, but obviously there's plenty of room to fill in different personalities and quirks and whatever.
There's going to be a doctor. There's going to be a first officer. There's going to be a science officer. There's going to be a helmsman and a navigator, and you know what the slots are, and you just got to fill them in with interesting people. Um, in the Stargazer, uh, the helm and navigation um, uh, positions were filled by identical twins. That was it. That was an interesting, and that actually became a springboard for a story in one of the Stargazer books. It did a series of 6 Stargazer books, and the third one was called Three, and and people were going, well, yeah, of course it's three, but what's the title of it? And I was, no, that's the title, Three, because um, the Stargazer comes into contact with an alternate universe, and one of the twins comes over, and now you have the two twins, Gerda and Idun, and this other one, and her name is Gerda Idun. And you go, well, but which one is she? Which twin is she? And it changes the dynamic, because when you're used to being a twin, and now there's a third one, it's like, well, which one of you? Which are you? Me? Are you my sister? Should I be close with you? Should I be closer with you than with her? Should we all be close? It changes the dynamic. I thought that was a lot of fun. It was interesting in that way.
That's great, man. And it's such a well. There's the Stargazer episode where the Ferengi guy who's got the revenge with Picard finds the Stargazer and reamps it and stuff. But I
Yeah,
always love, and you did the novelization of the James Doohan episode Relics,
right.
and I love that scene when they're in the holodeck and Scotty's sitting in the on the Enterprise, his Enterprise's bridge, and Picard says, "I my first captaincy was with the Stargazer. this ship is 1,000 times better in so many ways, but there are days where I wish I was captain of the Stargazer again. And that says it all about his relationship with his crew and his ship, his first ship. And
Mhm.
and it's great that you got the opportunity to write so many Stargazer stories. Yeah, I think it's cool. I'm again, it's it deepens the character and it gives us more to think about beyond what we got in those 7 seasons.
There's a Stargazer short story in one of the anthologies. I think it's in the Dominion War.
I was going to ask because I haven't bought that anthology, and I'm very curious about what you did with the Dominion War. Go on.
It's a great never mind my story. It's a great anthology. Keith DeCandido is the editor, and he did a great job. And the stories, again, it's a war, and
Right.
war just brings out, great story opportunities. So this one was called Perchance to Dream, and I can't tell you I can't tell you too
No
much about
spoil.
it because,
No, I want to read it. That's good.
I don't want to spoil the ending, but I will
Cool.
say it's a Stargazer crew story, and it takes place during the Dominion War, on a world um, dominated by the Jem'Hadar, I think it would be. Yeah,
Cool. I'm
and,
excited. All right.
and again, it all comes out in dialogue. Everything that lots and lots of dialogue in this one.
Good. That's great, man. No,
Yeah.
I remember too that although it really wasn't addressed on in the movies as far as what the Next Generation cast was doing with the Dominion War while it was being played out on Deep Space Nine, yeah. But I also the first Cardassian War, I would think is a great area to learn about. And I always felt like we got cheated. It was intimated, I think, in the two-parter when Spock showed up on Next Generation Unification. But I would have loved to have seen the political debate or even the personal debate between Sarek and Spock regarding the Cardassians, because I have a feeling that Sarek would have been like, we can't deal with these people. We have no choice but to go to war. Whereas Spock would always be like, well, there's always possibilities. You can't have a closed mind. And I think, like I said, I would have liked to have seen that conversation play out. It plays out in my brain, but
There's that hmm, that was something I probably should have thought of. I did a book called Crossover, where it actually one meaning of the crossover is that it's a Next Generation book, but it guest stars Spock, McCoy, and Scotty.
yep.
It's kind of a crossover in that sense.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's about Spock um, during the most dangerous part of the reunification process, and Sarek is in that book. I don't think they talked about that particular
Oh,
thing.
I didn't remember. I'm gonna have to reread that because I've
You
got
know,
crossover, but yeah, I didn't remember Sarek being in it, and certainly
I
by
hope,
unification, he's
listen, I hope he's in it. Now that I've said he's in it, I hope. And if he's not, I'm going to write him in.
attaboy. There you go.
One of the
That sounds good.
coolest moments of probably, of my life, not just of my Star Trek career, but I was at a convention in Massachusetts. Uh, it was a convention whose proceeds went to Make a Wish,
Okay, nice.
and the media guest was Mark Leonard,
Uh,
and I was a guest there too, and some other people whose names you'd recognize. And um, Mark and the people who were in the convention were able to get Unification Part One to show at the convention before it aired on
wow,
days before it aired on
cool. Oh,
on television. Yeah, yeah, it was amazing. And then and so I'm sitting next to Mark Leonard, watching him watch Sarek meet his end. And you could see he's kind of like assessing his performance. And I'm looking at him, looking at the screen, and I'm like, how cool is this? What a moment. I can kind of see where he's going. Yeah, that worked. And then him going, could have done that a little better.
Man, he is King Lear in that moment. I mean,
Yeah.
really. And I think we did talk about this before, Mike, but poor I think his name, I don't even remember what his name is, the guy who currently plays Sarek in Discovery. Those
Oh,
are those are such huge shoes to fill. And I'm
yeah.
sorry to say the guy needs a little patting in the toe to kind of fit in the shoes because he and it's so funny. I literally was just watching Star Trek 5 again because I have no life and I've seen it like 100 times. But even that moment, and it's just Mark Leonard's voice, but Cybok shows Spock's birth. And
Mhm.
there's this moment, and the physical actor really pulled it off as well. But you just hear Mark Leonard's so human. And it's just this great note of disappointment. My favorite scene, and I'm sure I've said this to you before, is in Star Trek 4 at the end, where it's Mark and it's Leonard, and they're he's like, I seem to remember initially I was against you joining Starfleet. Maybe that was a wrong decision. These associates of yours, they're of good character. And Spock goes, they're my friends. And it's great because Sarek just bristles and he suddenly goes back into Country Club Vulcan mode of, oh yeah, that friend bullshit about humans. All right, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, of course, and it's great. I mean, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Much like Ethan Peck has warmed up on me being
Mhm.
Spock in the new show. I wasn't crazy about him in the short treks and in season 2 of Discovery, but I think he is. I think he's found his voice. I'm not a fan of Zachary Quinto. I think well, there are different circumstances. He loses his planet, he loses Amanda, but he's just always pissed off, it seems. And he has more of I think he has more difficulty just doing the blank Vulcan poker face that Nimoy did so effortlessly, that Tim Russ, I think, did effortlessly on Voyager as well. And the other actors have managed to get that kind of, you know, blank face, look or whatever. But I always felt like Zachary Quinto was just kind of pissed off the way he plays Spock. I don't know.
Well, I think part of that was the direction. He was supposed to be the Spock of the first, what, 3 episodes of before they really nailed Spock down. So he was the
Right.
Spock of the first few episodes, and then Uhura was the Uhura of those episodes, and so there was like a little thing going on there, and I think that's probably at least partly because of the marching orders that he had. Whereas, I mean, Ethan Peck, first of all, does a great job, but that's partly because he's put in that position. It's like I don't have to tell you. You're if you're the manager of the Cubs, right, and you're putting everybody in a position to succeed, then maybe they will.
Maybe.
Whereas maybe at least once, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I was going to say you're digging the knife in my heart when you said the Cubs. I hear you, man. But yeah,
At least I knew you'd be interested in that. So I mean, it was at least once in recent memory it worked.
I hear that's so funny, man. You're right. Well, thank God we got one in at least. But and the other thing about the new show about Strange New Worlds, and like I said, Mike, I hope I'm not repeating myself with you, but to Pring, I think it's interesting they brought her in. But again, she was like almost a femme fatale in Amok Time, the original
Yeah,
series episode, where and I think they're making her too sympathetic in Strange New Worlds. And it's
well,
like, and also the fact that in the original episode, it was an arranged marriage. They hadn't met since, or maybe even at 8 years old, they didn't meet. I mean, you only see that baby picture of T'Pring, and then you see her as an adult in the rest of the episode.
I mean, first of all, I like what they've done with her, but I'm also of the mind that once something's established, you leave it established. And if that's, as you say, There are millions of things you can write about. You don't
Agreed.
have to. You don't have to retcon. You don't have to retcon to Pring or anyone else. Write a story about someone else. Um,
Yeah,
I think if we didn't run into the Ferengi for hundreds of years, don't put them in an episode of Enterprise. Don't do that. There are so many other things to do.
I agree with that. Instead of by the way, I love both the actress and the way they've written Nurse Chapel in Strange New Worlds. It is really inconsistent with what we got with Majel Barrett in the original series. What I think they should have done instead was, and again, this shows you I obsess far too much about Star Trek, but Jill Ireland's character from the original series, that they even established that
Yeah,
she had a crush on Spock when they were younger, and that would have been an interesting choice to put on Pike's Enterprise
yeah,
and show more of that, because even after Spock, he gets hit by the spores, his emotions are totally free, I love you and everything, but even when he's back being reserved again, you can tell he still has feelings for her. And again, I think that would have been much better than the unrequited love we got originally with Majel Barrett's
yeah.
portrayal of Chapel. But that, again, that's me.
You could, they could still put T'Pring in a place where she doesn't want to be married to Spock. They could still redeem
Sure,
part of that.
that's fair. Yeah,
But, but, as you say, supposedly he hasn't seen her for a long, long time. And here, quite clearly, he sees quite a bit of her.
well, and also the links that she goes to in Amok Time that is still there in their future. And she almost has Jim Kirk killed. And it's like, hey man, how do you have sympathy for this woman when she
Right.
goes to that degree? So it is going to be interesting if they play with that in any way. Oh, and I gotta ask you, Mike, and I'm so sorry, I hope I'm not keeping you too long. But all right, good. I don't think we talked about the new guy playing Jim Kirk. And I gotta be honest, again, maybe like Ethan Peck, he will grow into the role. But I really think Jim Kirk is like Jack Kennedy PT 109 era or young Abe Lincoln, where, because I've seen the arguments against him. I'm like, command and charisma are what you need from Kirk. I didn't feel any of that from this guy. He said all the right things. His actions were all the right things, maybe in that revamp of the Enemy Within, or whatever the name of that first Romulan episode was that they were playing with.
Balance of Terror.
Balance of Terror, of course. Thank you, man. Attaboy. But yeah,
I don't remember the name of my books, but I do remember that.
that's where you got the gigs. That's all right. But yeah, I'm like, he just didn't resonate, that charisma and that command that I think even Ensign Jim Kirk or Lieutenant Kirk, because a lot of people were saying, well, this is before he had the Enterprise, and maybe this is a earlier part in his career. I'm like, no, man. Jim Kirk is a guy, ever since he beat the Kobayashi Maru, where all the superiors are like, who's that guy? We got to pay attention to that guy because he's going places. I didn't
Yeah.
get that from this guy playing Jim Kirk.
I didn't either. I thought he didn't particularly look like Kirk. Um, I didn't. Again, I think it may have been the direction. It may have been the writing. I don't know. He clearly was. It seemed like he had been given two words: gunboat diplomat. Oh, he's a gunboat diplomat. Oh yeah, I can do that. Ignoring the other aspects of the full
Yeah.
Kirk character, and so that, yeah, it was almost like a caricature.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, I think it was direction that likely did do it. I keep hearing rumors that Ensign Mount took direction and said, yeah, okay, but was like, I've seen the cage. I know, I'm a Star Trek fan. I know what Christopher Pike means, and did his own thing. And I kept hearing rumors that they weren't crazy about that. on the production side, but then they saw the tidal wave of all of us who had been hating on Discovery going, we like that guy. We want a hell of a lot more with that guy. And I'm sure he would have come back in some sort of guest capacity or whatever. But whatever. I just think his Anson Mount really gets it. And I loved when Jeffrey Hunter played him. I liked when Bruce Greenwood did him in the JJ movies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny. Warren's got a couple comments. People forget that Kirk said he would rather run than fight, and start a war in Balance of Terror. That's a good point.
Yeah, right. Good point.
Absolutely, man. But yeah, your thoughts on
I was at a convention pre-COVID. I was at a convention with Anson Mount and Ethan Peck, and these guys, you could just tell they got it. They knew what they were doing. They had a genuine affection for Star Trek, and respect for it, and they had their heads on straight. So even before I saw much of them on screen, I knew that they would be good in these roles. I mean, sometimes guests at these cons show up, do their thing, maybe do it very well, and then you never see them again. And then other times, they'll be, maybe judging the masquerade or something like that. Like they'll get a little more involved.
Sure.
These guys, 1 o'clock in the morning, these guys were in the bar.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Surrounded by writers and fans and loving it.
That's great.
So it wasn't, you could tell they were into it, and they knew what they were doing. And I agree. I think his first of all, I think he's a great actor. Period.
Anson Mount.
And Ethan Peck as well. Don't forget, Ethan Peck has a harder challenge because he's got to work within the parameters of the Vulcan psyche. But they both, I think, do a great job.
I agree. Brad says Paul Wesley's Kirk reminds him of Kirk in the first season of TOS. I think Kirk had more command and charisma than what Paul Wesley is showing, and also he's too thin. He doesn't look very formidable.
Why? I'm sure he's a terrific actor and a wonderful person.
Yeah, he is. I've seen him in Vampire Diaries and other things he's done. He is a good actor. I just think miscast. And why? And why? What was it about him that was so compelling where they said that guy has to be Kirk? I honestly, and again, Mike, everybody listening and watching, this is me saying it. I think the producers feel like there's room for only one alpha male on each show. If there is an alpha male on the other shows, especially of the new Trek shows, and that Pike was always going to win. And it's like, no, these are two good guys that are coming at this problem with two different ways. Just like I was saying about the eugenics stuff. It's like, you've got to give equal weight. And especially with a character like Jim Kirk.
Right. The iconic Star Trek character. I mean, you've read enough comics to know, when a guy guest stars in your comic, you give the edge to the guy whose name is on the on
the cover. Yes.
But you got to give a lot of weight to the other hero because he's a hero and he's got his own comic.
Right.
So, you have to give that equal weight, as we were saying.
I hear you.
And it was just it was too skewed a portrayal of Kirk, I think.
Well, there was no charisma. I mean, again, he said all the right things. I could appreciate his plans. I just didn't see that Jim Kirk cockiness.
Yeah,
and I think that Chris Pine was able to channel in a different way than doing a Shatner imitation. But you saw that confidence, you saw that charisma,
confidence and self-doubt in a funny way, balancing both those things. This guy, this gentleman who portrayed Kirk in the episode we're talking about, he really didn't have either. He didn't have any of the self-doubt, and he didn't have any of the sure-handedness of command. You know, I think to be a good commander, you have to have both. You have to say to yourself, once I make a decision, it's made. But before I get to that point, I'm going to question myself a dozen times.
And also, building on what you just said, he just lost his ship in that episode. And where was that? I mean, where was any of that? And you would think there's a bit of frustration, humility. I mean, yeah, that kind of thing. And we saw none of that. And again, it's like that's why I kind of sensed we were to get some sort of episode of an It's a Wonderful Life spin of, okay, you want to save these kids, but there might be consequences. And I love that framework. But to use Balance of Terror within that framework, I felt like I was watching a high school production of Balance of Terror that is kind of missing the mark.
Yeah,
So
yeah. You could have done it without. I mean, I think for some reason the writers feel compelled to to uh, to tie into something in the continuity. I, I don't think at this point you have to. I don't think
I
it, I don't
agree.
think it's I don't think it's a plus. It doesn't have to be a minus, but I don't know that it's necessarily a plus. Just tell your story and don't worry about tying it in so much.
Well, we know he's coming. Paul Wesley's coming back for the second season. We've seen set photos of him with Khan's descendant, uh, Laan. So we'll see what happens. Warren has an interesting comment about the other women. He says maybe they'll leave room for T'Pring to get cold blooded. She is different. Uhura, he says, is way too little sister. Even a younger Uhura would be more womanly. They have definitely altered characters, though Chapel in Strange New Worlds is more interesting. Well, yeah, they give her more to do, and she's fun. I
Yeah,
mean, I loved what Majel did, but I mean, and again, it was the '60s, so you're gonna have the kind of Betty Cooper crush on Archie. Oh
yeah,
God, I wish she'd look at me, and I get that. And she
yeah,
did have
yeah,
some great naked time. She's fantastic when she just kind of pours her out to him. Or I love what Little Girls Are Made Of and Roger Corby and her and everything. That's all really good.
yeah. Well, I love that episode. You
Oh
know,
my God, Sherry, the Make One for Daddy older sister. I can't think of her. Sherry Jackson.
oh Sherry Jack. Oh,
Come
Sherry.
on, all of us as kids. Good Lord.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah.
Andrew.
That was that was lovely.
She was lovely. And man, Ted Cassidy. Ted Cassidy doesn't need makeup. Just put Ted Cassidy out there with that voice
Yeah,
and that size and that face. Oh my
yeah.
God. Rock. Ah,
Rock.
so good.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
good.
He was great. If they
Mike,
didn't,
go ahead.
if he didn't exist, they'd have to invent him, right, for that episode.
Richard Keel, too, in a different. Yeah, there's Ted Cassidy and Richard Keel. Absolutely. I saw Richard Keel once at a WonderCon when it was still in San Francisco. And oh my God, I mean, just his feet alone were like, the size of like watermelons. It was insane how big the guy was. And very sweet, very nice guy. But
Uh
yeah,
huh.
I'm bummed. Both of them died way too young. I wish Ted
Yeah,
Cassidy we'd gotten a
it's
few
that
more years of performances. Absolutely, man. Bummer. Bummer.
they
All right.
probably
Well,
had that. What do they call it?
oh, the gigantism or whatever when they are.
Gigantism. They probably had organ
Yeah.
problems, so on. Yeah.
Oof. No, that's tough. Well, listen, there are just over 2 weeks left in the Kickstarter campaign
Right.
for
Right.
Thalos and Other Stories. And let's get Mike over the top on this collection of short stories that features sci-fi, fantasy, superhero stuff, procedurals, and a lot more. And that's great. How many stories in total in the collection, Mike?
I, I I think there will be 8 or maybe 9. It's going to depend. Honestly, it's going to depend on the page count. Some of the stories, like Veneer and Delos, are finished. Some of them are partway finished. If it turns out that I've got 8 stories and the page count's a little anemic, I'm gonna write another one. I don't want
Okay,
I don't want the book to be too
sure,
thin. So that's it'll be 8 or 9
excellent.
8 or 9 stories,
Well,
and
Again,
and the
man.
kind that I want to read. The kind that I want to read.
Well, I hear you, man. And no, again, I think you've cultivated this audience that we know what you're capable of, and we want to support it. So that's great. And hey, if this story inspired some people to go check out the Kickstarter for its Thalos and Other Stories, and Michael Jan Freeman, and really, man, no, I think you're killing it as always, and I appreciate you indulging me with a healthy dose of Star Trek talk. But I encourage everyone to go to Amazon or your favorite bookstores as far as Mike's past work, but definitely support this Kickstarter. I think these are going to be some fun stories. So, Mike, as always, I'm glad you're hanging out. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. And I should plug as well our Crazy Eight Press website, where you'll find not only a bunch of my books, uh, novels, short story collections, and some of the work that I've edited with my colleagues, but also great work from all those other madmen at Crazy Eight Press. So
Agreed.
definitely check that out, Crazy Eight Press.
Absolutely, Crazy Eight Press. Everybody, no, it's great stuff. Congratulations. Any conventions coming up?
I'm going next month. I'll be at Farpoint in Baltimore, or outside Baltimore, which is a great convention. And then in May, I'll be at Long Island Trek, which also promises to be terrific. And the other convention I'm lined up for is Shore Leave in July, and you should come to Shore Leave, John.
Oh, I would love that, Mike. Absolutely. No, Shirley's one of those great long running cons. And which city is Shore Leave in?
It's also just north of Baltimore.
Oh wow! All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's food for thought, man. No, I'll see what I can do, man. I mean, I'm running on a shoestring these days.
I'll pick you up at the airport.
You're too nice. That's awesome. No, I really do hope we, beyond Zooming face to face and StreamYarding face to face, I hope we get a chance to see each other in person sooner than later. Definitely.
Yeah.
But as always, Mike, I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk again. Anytime, man. You know that. I'm happy to have a new talk. So whenever you got something you need to promote or want to promote or just want to bullshit about Star Trek, you know where to find me.
Okay. I appreciate that. As always, I appreciate it. And thanks for helping me boost the signal.
My pleasure. Everybody, next Monday. Oh God, what do I get? Now I'm blanking. Oh, next Monday, Mike. I don't know if you remember this terrible movie from 1968, Skidoo. Otto Premiger's terrible. It's one of those, as Mike knows, because Mike and I are old guys. There was a time when the older generation really tried to figure out the hippie generation, the culture of the 60s, and failed miserably pretty much every time.
Right.
And Skidoo is a classic example of this. It's Jackie Gleason tripping on acid. It's Carol Channing tripping on acid and doing a striptease for Frankie Avalon. Yikes. Groucho Marx, his last film. Mickey Rooney, so many other, Peter Lawford, Burgess Meredith, this amazing cast. Nielsen, I was going to say Donovan. Nielsen sings the closing credits.
Wow.
It's a very weird 1968 movie.
I've never heard of this.
Well, it's on YouTube, everybody, and we'll be talking about it next Monday on Word Balloon Live. And my scene missing partners, Gabriel Hardman and Ian Brill. And we're going to subject ourselves to Skidoo. If you'd like to join us, you can watch it on YouTube and then watch us talk about it next Monday night.
Skidoo. That sounds great. That's great. Now, curious.
There you go, man. Well, I can send you the link if you're that curious, Mike. Until next time, everybody, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.